And welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. And my guest today is Scott Eblin. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Peter.
Great. Let me give everybody Scott's bio here. He's the president of the Eblin Group, which is a leadership development firm which is committed to helping clients lead at their best and live at their best. That's a pretty powerful statement. Scott is the author of two best-selling books, The Next Level, What Insiders Know About Executive Success, and Overworked and Overwhelmed, The Mindfulness Alternative, which is pretty cool. Scott's a coach, an author, a speaker, and also a registered yoga teacher from the Yoga Alliance. So we can get into some yoga today too, which I could probably
We can.
Anyway, thanks for joining us today. So let's dive right in.
Okay.
You've been at this for a while from a lot of different angles in terms of the writing and the speaking and all that. How did you make the decision to not do what you were doing prior to this and say, yeah, I want to do this. I want to
Yeah.
go for this.
The origin story. So that was about 18 years ago. And I'd been a corporate guy for 15 years or so. I was in financial services industry and the energy industry mainly. And my last corporate job, I was the head of HR for the main component of a Fortune 250-ish kind of company. And we used coaches for our senior leadership team. I was one of the coaches or one of the senior leaders that had a coach, and as head of HR, kind of knew all the coaches that were in our organization. And this is back like in the late 90s when coaching was still kind of a new thing and not really as widely known or as practiced as it is now. And I'd kind of gotten to the point in my life, in my career, where in that particular company, I felt like we had done everything we said we were going to do as a new management team that was coming in and breaking out of bankruptcy. And I don't like repeating myself. And I was young and starting to get bored, honestly. And so I really spent about a year thinking like, okay, what do I really want to do? And through some good advice, some friends and coaches that I was talking to and others, I decided to go out on my own as a coach. And it was all the stuff I loved about corporate life, and none of the stuff I didn't love about corporate life was my one-liner on why I was doing that. And the first 3 or 4 years, starting in December of 2000, was almost 100% executive coaching, just one-on-one executive coaching. And it morphed and grew from there.
And what does that look like today? So give me a sense of what the firm does and how much it looks like what it did years ago and how things have evolved and changed and grown.
Yeah. So like you said in the open, our big idea or our main offer is to help leaders and organizations help their leaders lead at their best and live it by living at their best, right? And I feel like I've got some expertise in both spaces, and the leadership space for sure for many, many years. And The Next Level is primarily a book about leadership behaviors. And then the Overworked and Overwhelmed book that you mentioned came out in 2014. And it's a book really about managing yourself and living at your best. And so we've just kind of been in that space, if I think back on it, for at least 10 years. And have just kind of gotten more and more clear with ourselves as the Eblin Group, and more clear with our clients about what we offer. And so today it's all organized around that idea. And it's probably about a third in terms of revenue generating activities. Executive coaching is still a third, usually C-suite kind of clients there. And then we have a number of programs that are based on my books that are longer term leadership development programs. Our flagship, one of those, is called Next Level Leadership. And that's a cohort-based program for high potentials that involves a lot of different components, and it has done really well over the years for our clients. And then the last third is, as you suggested in the opening, speaking. And I do a lot of keynotes and 2 to 3 hour workshops where I'm a faculty member on a larger leadership program that a company's putting on, or I come in and do just the workshop as a standalone or whatever it might be.
Got it. So one of the sort of trends or patterns in your world that I'm hearing is you were early onto the executive coaching scene, And a lot of the essence of your content in terms of mindfulness and then integrating the personal side to the professional side is way more mainstream today, with Google focusing on mindfulness than it was certainly 5 years ago and absolutely 10 years ago. What's the good news, bad news for you on strictly from a business perspective of being a little bit early to the dance on some of these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the early to the dance part, the good news, I think, is what you've said. It's that it's more accepted, and I think people what I'm trying to do with all of that idea, the mindfulness idea, is really make it simple and make it really accessible for people who couldn't imagine sitting still for 5 minutes with their eyes closed to meditate, right? I mean, so like, I could never do that. I mean, I hear that all the time. So great, could you take 3 deep breaths from your belly? Oh yeah, I could do that. Okay, good. That's a great start. And so I'm trying to meet people where they are with this content. And I think their organizations really appreciate that. So really, the good news is I've been able to simplify a lot of this stuff to make it accessible for people who can definitely benefit from it. And I focus a lot on the physiology, the fight or flight and the rest and digest.
Yeah, I was thinking about it a little bit differently than the individual participant. What I was trying to understand is convincing an organization to fund a program that might seem a little, whoa, like that's, like I don't know if they're doing that at John Deere, but they're certainly doing it at Google. Right. Right. So Horton and using sort of the green visored CFO with what's the ROI on that and what do we care how our employees breathe. How do you overcome that or manage that or use that to your advantage?
I gotcha. Okay, so I'll answer that by answering the bad news part of your question from a minute ago. The bad news part, like on that book, Overworked and Overwhelmed, the mindfulness alternative. Lesson learned on that, great business to consumer title. I had tons of individuals tell me, "Oh my God, that's totally me. I'm going to buy that book because I'm overworked and overwhelmed." Terrible business to business title because it's not aspirational, and a lot of organizations probably aren't going to buy that book by the box because to hand out at training because it feels like an admission of culpability, like we're the reason you're overworked and overwhelmed. And they're not really. Like every organization is experiencing that, but bad title. So being early to it, I didn't understand how to position it. So what I do now to position it is it's really focused on that phrase at your best, lead at your best, live at your best, and specifically the at your best part. I mean, who doesn't want to be at their best? Who doesn't want their leaders to be at their best, right? And so that's really and what's it take in terms of managing yourself, leveraging your team, engaging your colleagues? What does it take for leaders to be fully at their best? And that's really how I'm making the sale, really.
I would argue that that's largely packaging, right? So the using the at your best as sort of the headline as opposed to overwhelmed and overworked. Underneath the hood, the essence of what you do is the same, but first impressions matter and words matter, right? So like you said, who doesn't want to be at your best? Of course I want to be at my best at home, at work, whatever, but overworked and overwhelmed, I'm like, oh, like, yeah, so
Yeah, exactly.
it might seem like optics are silly, but it's really important. So could you give an example or two of how you've benefited from the business side of sort of leading with this sort of at your best label versus overworked, overwhelmed?
Yeah, sure. It makes it easier to have the conversation because I don't have this barrier really that I established for myself of talking about are your people overworked and overwhelmed? I mean, well, yeah, some people will be honest with you and say they are, but you don't really want to start there. But do you need your leaders to perform at your best? Well, yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Right, right.
So what's that take? And what's working for them, what's not working for them, and showing up at their best. Well, they got so much on their plate, they got a gazillion emails, and then they go on to describe the overworked and overwhelmed scenario. Sure, great, we can help you with that. We can help your leaders identify simple, practical, easy to apply tactics and strategies that will both help them lead at their best and live at their best. And that is a much easier conversation.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about sort of things that originally start way outside of the workplace or might not even be considered appropriate for the workplace or accepted in the workplace and then start to become mainstream. So let's look at mindfulness, for example. Like there have been zillions of people practicing all forms of meditation for many, many years. And they've never really talked about that in the work environment 15, 20 years ago. And it's sort of almost a trend. Like all of a sudden, everybody's popping out of the woodwork saying, I've been practicing this for TM for 20 years. So they're sort of coming out of the closet, if you will. Tell me about how that sort of works in your favor when it's more appropriate or more accepted to talk about some of these practices, yoga as well.
Well, like you say, I mean, if you've got a room full of 100 leaders, almost guaranteed there are going to be a reasonable percentage of those people who practice, they're using Headspace, the meditation app, they're using Headspace, or they go to yoga, and they practice yoga regularly. And so that's an exposure to the mindfulness practice. And so, yeah, the mechanics of it are more and more common, right? I mean, you see more common usage of that. What I have started to move away from, and I bring it up, but I don't dwell on it, is the word mindfulness, actually, right? Because I've kind of come to the conclusion that even that is an unnecessary barrier for a large group of people, and when I'm doing the workshops or the keynotes or whatever, and I just break it down to like, what is it really? Well, really it's about being aware of what's going on around you and what's going on inside of you, and then being intentional about what you're going to do or not going to do next.
So you're deconstructing the word, which might cause a reaction in folks, and getting to the
exactly. I want to de-emotionalize the word. I want to remove any
stigma,
bias or preconceptions that people have around the word. But and like, who's opposed to being aware and intentional? Like, I haven't met anybody yet, who's opposed to that. And so, well, that's mindfulness for sure, right? And so now let's talk about how your body works for you and against you to show up aware and intentional, and what you can do to mitigate the things that make it harder.
Got it. So let's talk about, you've got multiple lines of business, if you will, right? You have the books, you have the content creation, you have the speaking, you have the programs, you have the coaching. How do they connect to one another for you in terms of, for example, someone picks up a book and they're like, wow, this Eblin guy's pretty smart. What else does he do? Go from awareness to getting embedded inside of an organization.
Well, so the first thing I'll say is something that I'm sure, I think I know you preach to your clients all the time, which is a book is just one channel for a set of ideas, right?
Yep.
And so when I was originally writing The Next Level back in 2006, the first edition, which when it came out, at least 2004, 2005, writing it, Diane, my wife and business partner and life partner, we always had the idea that the book was just a channel, and that we were going to build our business basically around the content of that book. And we did, through group coaching programs, through workshops, through videos on Skillsoft, through a 360 instrument online, through self-assessments, through discussion guides, you name it, right?
And all of those things are powered by the content that lived in the book, right? Each of those.
Completely. Yeah. Absolutely, positively, to this day. I mean, I often think about that. I mean, it's like, man, it was hard to write a book for sure, but not that hard. And the return on that investment of time literally been life-changing, and, life-changing for us, but also, I don't want to get like overwrought here, but I think life-changing for a lot of people. I mean, it's the people who have read it, and I get that all the time. And that's what's more gratifying than that, really.
That's fantastic. So what are some of the things that you're doing now that are working, that are relatively new or creative or innovative? What are the things that you're doing in terms of getting the awareness out there and getting folks to sort of opt in and say, yeah, we want some more of that?
Yeah, that's a great question on innovative. So I'll start with where I'm not yet, but where I want to go. I definitely want to have a digital learning solution for this stuff, and really just trying to figure out the right process for doing that. So that's something I know I need to do that I haven't done. But what we are doing, I think we've been really successful over the years, and this is not necessarily new, but it's been super powerful to this day. It's powerful. I mean, like, I've got examples from this week where it's made a difference. The blogging, I've been a very consistent blogger since like 2008 and have a pretty good following on my blog. And that has been a huge way to get us out there, a huge way to establish credibility and visibility, and tons of business inquiries have come through the blog over the years, and we've converted a lot of that over the years.
And what does consistent mean? What's because people have different.
Consistent means I still write. It's like I'd say consistent for me now is one meaty post a month at this point.
Okay.
And I used to go. I used like in the early days, I used to write 3 posts a week, and I did that for 3 or 4 years. And it was very headline driven. Here's something that happened in the news. Here's the leadership angle on that. And I kind of burned out on that. And what I've concluded is quality is way better than quantity on blogging.
Well, when you go headline driven, you're creating a perishable, right? Because I don't want to go back and read something about the headline from 3 years ago.
Totally. You're totally right. So, still very active with that. The LinkedIn, honestly, I mean, I know that sounds like super simple and easy, but it's amazing how powerful LinkedIn is to help you stay in touch with your network, especially when you publish your content on LinkedIn. It creates great opportunities to renew conversations with people, people that you knew 2 or 3 years ago and lost touch with. And I've had that happen as recently as this week again. So that's really cool. Definitely want to get a podcast going like you. So I admire you. You've got 40 episodes or whatever you've got. And I've just been like too much of a perfectionist, I think, to get a podcast started. And I've got to get that done.
On the podcasting side, from a tech standpoint and all that, it's easier now than it's ever been. One other thing that you might want to consider, Scott, is, becoming a guest more frequently on podcasts, because it's sort of an easy way without having to be burdened with the production and all that to sort of work the kinks out if it's something that you're interested in.
That's a great idea. And so thank you for getting me started as a guest. That's good stuff that I'll take your lead on that.
Great. This is, we'll look back one day and this was like, the Beatles' first concert at Chase Stadium.
It's the Beatles in Hamburg.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. So, imagine if you could think big, whatever. Anyway, so you've got the podcasting. Let's sort of, as we wrap up here, maybe give some folks a couple of pearls of wisdom of things they should be thinking about as they dive into this space or consider diving into a content-based world.
I'll go back to a pearl of wisdom from Marshall Goldsmith, which I'm sure everybody listening is familiar with. The whole reason I wrote a book in the first place was back in the early 2000s. Marshall was trying to put together a network of coaches around the world called the Alliance for Strategic Leadership. And I had a mutual friend who knew Marshall, and I was a baby coach. I'd been at it for like 2.5 years at that point. And so this friend connects me with Marshall, and I have a phone call. Marshall says, I'm going to have this meeting in La Jolla in San Diego. You should come to it. It's all these coaches. And I said, great, I'll go. And so I went, and there's like 100 people there. And I'm meeting these people who are like, well, I've written 5 books and I'm coaching Al Gore. And like, oh my God, I got nothing. You're like, what am I doing here?
I'm coaching Little League.
Yeah, exactly. I literally was having an anxiety attack. I had to go hide in the men's room at one point. And but Marshall, every time he got up that weekend to talk to the group, he said the same thing like 3 different times. That everybody here needs to be thinking about what book you're going to write, because that's how you differentiate yourself in this business. As you write a book. Now, I don't know if that's still true. I think there's other ways to differentiate yourself, but that idea, like, oh wow, okay, I've got to differentiate myself. And so I just sat there that weekend thinking, okay. The old thing about write what you know. What did I know? I knew what it was like to be an executive in over their head, because that's where I'd been as an executive, and that's who I was coaching. And like, what do you have to pick up and let go of when you're in that situation? And that was the initial outline of the first book. And so I've said it to him several times. I completely owe what's happened since then to him, because I don't think I would have been motivated to do it without that.
Got it. So there's nothing like a good panic attack to launch a great business. That's like the Reader's Digest.
There's probably other ways. It's not the most pleasant thing, but it's memorable.
And it might as well be on mindfulness, which prevents panic attacks. But anyway, I appreciate your time here. I appreciate you sharing your journey and becoming a guest on a podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for making that all possible. Thank you so much, Peter. I enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Thanks. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.